Meaning every human being has the capacity for enlightenment and has the capacity for unlimited.
There are houses that look perfect from the outside, but the deeper you step inside, the more cracks they reveal. And this is one of them. Behind the glittering lights of the Hollywood Hills, where Herbie Hancock lives, there isn't just world-class music or a fortune that leaves people stunned. There's also a life filled with way too many dark corners. Money can buy a lot of things. A beautiful house, lavish parties, fancy clothes, but can it buy a whole, unbroken family? Fame can cover up the past, but can it completely erase every mistake? That house is truly beautiful. But if you think it's paradise, the shore of happiness, then you probably haven't seen the rest of the story yet. And what I'm about to tell you will make you look at everything from the beginning. The morning of April 12, 1987, as dawn just started breaking behind the Hollywood sign, the whole area was still wrapped in a thin, gentle, quiet mist. Herbie sat on the wide Italian granite balcony of the house, his eyes drifting over Los Angeles, slowly waking up. Streaks of light slipped through the hills, touching distant rooftops, creating a feeling that was both close and far away. Mountain breeze carried a light chill, brushing past the tall palms lining the nearly 100-meter private driveway, making the leaves rustle softly like they were whispering something. The ground-embedded LED lights from the night before still glowed faintly, as if clinging to the last moments of darkness. He chanted Nichiren Sutras in a low, steady voice, the sound blending into the peaceful early morning air. Upstairs, a small bell in the meditation room rang gently, the sound rippling out softly like waves, dissolving into the faint scent of incense. Outside, the steady trickle from a small fountain created a calm background rhythm, making everything feel separate from the hectic pace of the city. Inside the open Japanese-style kitchen, Gigi, the woman who had stood by him since 1968, was slowly brewing organic green tea. Her movements were gentle and precise, every gesture carrying quiet peace. Everything, from the light and sound to the rhythm of breath, blended together, creating a serene morning. He bought this house at the end of November 1975, right after the album Headhunters created a huge wave in the music world and became the first jazz album to go platinum. At the time, he was 35, freshly out of his musical journey with Miles Davis, carrying a deep desire to find his own space, quiet enough to nurture new ideas. The price tag of over $300,000 back then, more than $1, $5 million in today's money, was no small number, but with worldwide tours and his Blue Note Records contract, he could afford to turn this place into his own world. Perched in the hills near Hollywood Hills, right by the bird streets, the house offered a rare balance, close enough to stay connected to work, yet far enough to escape the noise of Sunset Boulevard. In 1984 to 1985, after the success of Future Shock and the hit Rocket, he completely renovated the house. It was reborn in a mid-century modern style mixed with futuristic touches. White concrete combined with large tempered glass panels, a sloped roof following the hillside, sliding windows that opened the entire living room so that when the mountain wind rushed in, the inside felt like it was breathing with nature. The main balcony was about 80 square meters with teak chairs and a small granite Buddha statue, where he sat to meditate every morning, keeping his mind balanced between fame and stillness. The surrounding garden was densely planted with over 200 palms, olive trees, and lavender, creating a natural sound barrier so that outside noise could barely reach inside. The infinity pool, finished in June 1985, lay calm like a giant mirror, reflecting twinkling stars every night as if the sky had flipped upside down. Inside, the space was so minimalist it almost felt cold. Light European oak floors, pale white walls, furniture kept to the bare minimum. On the walls hung only a few abstract paintings he had painted himself, as if trying to express thoughts that hadn't yet become words. The Steinway & Sons grand piano in the center of the living room was where he would sit in the late afternoons and let music guide his emotions. The Bowers & Wilkins sound system was built into the ceiling, so subtle it was almost invisible, paired with early prototype Apple controls, a choice that showed he was always ahead of his time. The house lights could adjust automatically to his breathing rhythm during meditation, making the space feel alive, listening to its owner. Hidden deep in the basement was the real heart of the house, a 120 square meter studio, soundproofed with 40-centimeter thick walls and a floating anti-vibration floor. Gear like the ARP Odyssey, Prophet 5, Yamaha DX7, and Fairlight CMY stacked up, creating a complex, mesmerizing world of sound. A 48-channel Neve mixing board and 24-track recording system dominated the center, while the experimental corner with cables, MIDI modules, and old CRT monitors had its own kind of beautiful chaos. Light from the skylight mixed with the ventilation system, keeping the space fresh even when he worked 18 to 20 hours a day, whether in the sticky heat of March or the stifling days of August. On the top floor, the Japanese-style tatami meditation room opened to a full view of the city. There, the scent of incense blended with the sound of water, creating the feeling of a quiet monastery right in the heart of Hollywood, where all the noise seemed to stop at the doorstep. But all that beauty, when you really think about it, was just a thin shell, shining in outsiders' eyes, while behind it lay the cracks. Herbie's life tragedy started very early, in Chicago in April 1940, the day he cried his first cry in a family that had just left Georgia. His father, Wayman, worked as a government meat inspector, a stable but dry job. His mother, Winnie, was a secretary who carried a sweet love for music. She could play classical piano, and those graceful melodies sometimes became rare comfort in their small house during stormy days. Yet deep inside Winnie there was always a nameless battle. Back then, no one had a name for her illness. They just saw sudden, powerful mood swings like underwater currents. One moment she would hold her child close, her voice soft as velvet, her eyes warm as morning sun. But seconds later, everything changed, her words turning sharp and cold like an invisible blade cutting into a young heart. The house was always strung tight like a piano wire, and no one knew when it would snap. In that atmosphere, Herbie started learning piano at age 7. His talent showed early and progressed so fast it left people stunned. By November 1951, at just 11 years old, he performed Mozart's concerto with the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, a shining moment any child would dream of. But the stage lights weren't bright enough to light up his childhood. When he came home, he still had to face his mother's unpredictable moods and the heavy air that always hung over the house. At the time, no one understood what was wrong with Herbie's mother. The idea of bipolar disorder was still vague, so everyone just suffered in silence. Herbie and his two siblings, Jean and Wayman Jr., learned to survive in that house in different ways. Jean was the most special. Her mind developed early, and she was extremely bright. At 3, she taught herself math, then started tinkering with guitar and writing lyrics. She wasn't just a big sister, she was a musical companion, quietly standing behind many of her brother's compositions. So Herbie dove into music as an escape, while Jean buried herself in studying and writing. Wayman Jr. tried to stay as quiet as possible to avoid catching their mother's attention. Because of that, Herbie ended up carrying extra pressure. He absorbed his mother's emotional storms, lived in the shadow of his prodigy sister, and had to comfort his younger brother. In the 1950s, Herbie attended Grinnell College and graduated in June 1960 with degrees in music and electrical engineering. Now, he faced an inner tug-of-war. One side burned with passion, the other offered stability. The choice that seemed simple became a heavy burden. In the end, he chose jazz, but confidence didn't come with the decision. As a black man who wore glasses, dressed neatly, and spoke like an engineer, he was looked at with suspicion in the jazz world. People didn't see the free-spirited artist vibe they usually praised. So even though he was a genius, Herbie spent years battling deep insecurity about his appearance in an industry that valued flashy looks. Throughout the 60s and 70s, he was often labeled a bookworm or too intellectual to be truly cool like other jazz artists. The glasses, the neat clothes, the way he talked like an electronics engineer made him an outsider in jazz circles that favored the gritty, carefree, cool lifestyle of Miles Davis. He stood between many worlds but never fully belonged to any. Too classical for rock, too modern for traditional jazz, too rational for soul. That long feeling of not fitting in helped push him into crises of self-worth, sometimes making him doubt his own value. After moving to New York, he started playing with trumpeter Donald Byrd. In 1962, he signed with Blue Note and released his first album, Taken Off, which included the hit Watermelon Man. Just 1 year later, Miles Davis invited him to join the Miles Davis Quintet, one of the greatest jazz bands of all time. Over the next 5 years, he played a key role in shaping modern jazz sound through albums like SP, Nefertiti, and Sorcerer. And in 1964, the brightest light of his life appeared when he first met Gigi Meixner at a jazz club in New York City. They met on Halloween night when he was 24, and she was working for the American Academy of Arts. She wore a flowing red dress with a wide skirt. With just one look, he felt this woman was his destiny. He awkwardly struck up a conversation, but his genuine, unpolished body actually moved her. Later, she was the woman on the cover of his famous 1968 album, Speak Like a Child. On August 26, 1968, they got married. She was a strong woman, understanding but firm enough to keep him from slipping. They had a daughter named Jessica. On the surface, it looked like a complete family, but in reality, it wasn't as smooth as it seemed. In the 1970s, when Herbie poured all his energy into music, especially the Headhunters project, and non-stop touring, he basically lived on planes and in strange hotel rooms. He wasn't just an artist. He was a perfectionist and a technology addict to the extreme. There were times he spent 18 to 20 hours a day just tinkering with synthesizers, computers, and controllers. That obsession pulled him away from normal relationships. He didn't have many friends outside of music. The solitude he created himself was a heavy price he paid for timeless creativity. And that same perfectionism meant Jessica grew up with a faint image of her father, while Gigi had to handle everything alone, from raising their child to managing her husband's career when needed. There were periods when she basically played the role of manager and nanny instead of an equal wife. That imbalance caused many heated arguments between them. Their disagreements simmered the way they do in many marriages, slowly making the relationship feel heavy. Still, like many couples, they showed forgiveness and tried to build the family. Later, Herbie admitted this was one of the things he regretted most deeply, realizing he had put music above family. Jessica grew up, followed the Nichiren path, and worked in communications for her father's organization, but the wounds from childhood still left some distance between them. Still, it's hard to blame Herbie for pouring most of his heart into his work, because during this time his career faced many setbacks. When he moved into funk and jazz fusion, especially after the 1973 album Headhunters, he was harshly criticized by conservative jazz fans. Critics and jazz magazines at the time regularly slammed his electronic experiments, saying he was selling out the soul of jazz for commercial success. Not only that, he was seen as a traitor to jazz. Many of his contemporaries, other giants, cut ties and openly mocked him. One memory Herbie could never forget was June 28, 1974, when Wynton Marsalis, the symbol of the neoclassical jazz movement, publicly criticized him for chasing popular music and using technology. Marsalis said it wasn't jazz. A fierce argument broke out in front of everyone. Herbie calmly explained his view that art needs innovation and creativity, but Wynton wouldn't hear it. When Herbie decided he didn't want to argue anymore and turned to leave, Winton got hot-headed, grabbed Herbie's shoulder hard enough to dislocate it. Herbie had to get treatment for a whole month before he could move his arm normally again. After that, the relationship between the two artists remained tense because of their opposing views on what real music was. For someone as sensitive as Herbie, being turned on by the community he once saw as family during the Miles Davis years was a heavy psychological blow. He went through years of loneliness in the artist world, no longer welcomed in traditional jazz clubs. But it was exactly during that period of isolation that he found another comfort: Nichiren Buddhism. Nichiren Buddhism brought Herbie stillness and peace that perfectly matched his calm personality. The problem was that trouble also came from it. Starting around late 1974, when he began practicing and promoting Nichiren Buddhism, traditional jazz artists looked at him with even more suspicion. They saw it as a kind of brainwashing. Herbie was viewed by many colleagues as weird or fanatical. His refusal to party, refusal of alcohol, and replacement with daily chanting turned him into an alien in the smoky, boozy underground world of New York jazz clubs. What's more, every time he advised someone not to fall into bad habits, they accused him of thinking he was better than everyone else. It was a truly frightening social isolation for any artist. However, instead of falling into depression or striking back with bitterness, Herbie turned those challenges into strength through his practice. He saw drugs and failures not as stains, but as opportunities to turn poison into medicine. That philosophy kept him from collapsing under critics' attacks and helped him hold on to his artistic identity. He wasn't just a musician, but a person on a mission to connect people through music. Still, jealousy and prejudice never let him go. In the 80s, when Herbie achieved huge success with Future Shock and the hit Rocket, he faced discrimination even from some people of his own race. Certain black artist communities at the time felt he was whitening his music by using Western technology to serve mainstream pop/MTV tastes. He was caught in crossfire, criticized by traditional jazz fans for being too commercial and by some in the black jazz community for losing his roots. Of course, Herbie always ignored the harsh words. His determination, persistence, and passion earned him many prestigious awards throughout his life, including 14 Grammys and an Oscar for the Round Midnight soundtrack. He also served as a professor at Harvard and chairman of the Thelonious Monk Institute of Jazz. Then on August 2, 1985, a major tragedy struck. Jean, then 41, boarded Delta Flight 191 from Fort Lauderdale to Dallas. Before leaving, she had called Herbie to set a date to visit and see her niece. No one imagined it would be their last conversation. Around 6 p.m., the Lockheed L-1011 TriStar was approaching Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport in stormy weather. At about 800 feet, it entered a thunderstorm cell and encountered a microburst, a powerful downward blast of cold air that spread in all directions. In the violent storm, the plane shuddered, lost control, and plunged. It was pushed down 1,000 feet in seconds. After hitting the ground, it skidded across Texas State Highway 114 at over 320 kilometers per hour, slammed into two huge water tanks at the airport, and erupted into a massive fireball. The crash killed 133 people, and Jean was among them. The terrible news reached Herbie while he was in Greece preparing for the Athens Jazz Festival. In that moment, the stage in front of him seemed to collapse. He rushed back to Los Angeles with a heavy heart and dazed eyes. The sister, who had been his closest companion, who had encouraged his passion from the beginning, was gone without a chance to say goodbye. Jean wasn't just a big sister. She was a partner from the earliest days, the one who helped shape his music, wrote lyrics for him, for Earth, Wind and Fire, for Booker T, and the MGs. There was one memory of his sister Herbie could never forget. When Jean once dreamed of becoming a singer, he bluntly told her she didn't have what it took. At the time, it might have been an honest observation, but later it became something that haunted him with endless regret. When he lost her, the pain wasn't just separation. It was the feeling that he would never have the chance to fix it, never be able to make up for the hurt he had caused. And that made the loss even deeper. In the years after, he spent hours every day in the meditation room, chanting with the hope of transforming that pain into something gentler. Not long after Gene's death, in early 1986, another problem continued to tear at Herbie's life. His hands, the very things tied to his entire musical existence, were in danger of being destroyed forever. A tumor appeared in his left hand, small but terrifying, pressing on the core tendons and muscles, a warning that his career might have to stop. Hope flickered when doctors offered surgery with less than a 50% success rate. Herbie had no other choice and decided on surgery within a week. The days of waiting before the operation felt endless. He entered the operating room with overwhelming anxiety. The doctors struggled with the tumor for 8 hours because it was tangled in tendons, muscles, and blood vessels like a knot of hair. Fortunately, the surgery succeeded. He recovered after 6 months, and his fingers could once again glide freely across the keys. The next nearly 10 years passed fairly peacefully. But his path was never completely smooth, because even with major achievements and many awards, he was still seen by some traditional jazz artists as someone who had gone off course with his fusion experiments and bringing electronic and hip-hop elements into the music. Some openly criticized him, saying those innovations were just superficial decoration. Others judged him even more harshly, claiming he had abandoned his cultural roots. He stood in the middle of those conflicting opinions, but never gave up the path he had chosen. His Nichiren faith became the anchor that kept him balanced, but it also made him stand out more. When colleagues went to parties, he chose to stay alone, chanting in quiet space. When other people's shallow parties stretched until dawn, he kept his distance, avoiding those noisy scenes. That choice gave him peace, but it also created distance from many around him. He calmly accepted it, as if accepting an inevitable part of the journey. Bitterly, just when everything seemed stable, and he could finally say it was complete, with a brilliant career, a warm family, and a peaceful heart, he stumbled again. Unlike many jazz artists of his era who fell into drugs while young, in the 60s and 70s, Herbie fell into the trap after he was already over 50. Late 1994, he became belatedly curious about the high the substance could bring. On New Year's Eve that year, at a loud party with flickering lights and laughter mixing together, someone handed him a pipe. He tried it, just once, and the intense, amazing feeling hit so hard it stopped him cold. Every sense was pushed to the limit, pleasure spreading through his body, too strong, too fast. In that moment, he knew clearly this shouldn't continue. But the thought passed. Herbie had believed he was highly disciplined, a longtime Buddhist who could try a little without getting hooked. He was wrong. Addiction quickly took hold of his mind. What's more, even with his hugely successful career and happy family, he still felt invisible pressures and sometimes emptiness. He turned to cocaine as a way to temporarily escape reality and the enormous expectations from the public. It was also a way to stretch his alertness and delay the deadlines piling up. Dozens of times he reassured himself that he was in control, that it was just a temporary tool, but the line quickly blurred. The addiction crept into the gaps between tours, into the rare moments of rest. He set rules for himself. No using while on tour, no touching it when family was around. Those rules sounded strict, but in reality, they meant almost nothing. Addiction is addiction, plain and simple. His body gradually wore down, his spirit cracked. He even missed Jessica's 30th birthday, a moment that should have been pure joy. When he finally realized how far he had fallen, the situation was already hard to save. The very people he once advised don't fall started pointing fingers at him. They called him two-faced, laughed that his mind wasn't as steady as they thought. He couldn't argue back because he knew he had truly gone wrong. He could only try to quit quietly, but it was useless. The truth finally came out. Gigi and Jessica noticed the strange signs. On March 28, 1999, the two of them chose to confront Herbie directly. Under his daughter's worried eyes, he couldn't hide anymore. It was the moment he felt shame all the way to his core. Shame rose up and choked him, bringing tears. But at the same time, a feeling of relief spread because he no longer had to hide his problem. The very next morning, he entered a rehab center in Malibu, a quiet place not too far from the Hollywood Hills. The first weeks were brutal. His body reacted violently to the lack of stimulants. Seizures came often, his mind spun and left him disoriented. During those long nights, he chanted Nichiren nonstop. The small bell rang steadily in his private room, helping him keep his mind steady. Gigi visited every week, bringing green tea and vegetables from the family's small garden. Her presence was enough to give him a solid anchor. Jessica wrote her father a letter every day to give him motivation. She told him about her life, about how she used Buddhist philosophy to heal the wounds from her childhood. Those simple words, read in the quiet and empty space, carried special weight. Day by day, Herbie slowly regained balance, not through one sudden turn, but through small, repeated, persistent changes. Family support pulled him back from the edge. He successfully quit, step by step moving away from what had held him for years and regaining clarity. From 2000 onward, he stayed completely clean. No crack, no cocaine, no alcohol, no cigarettes. A new chapter opened. Early April 2000, when he left the treatment center and returned to the familiar house, he stood silently for a long time on the front steps. Everything looked unchanged. The granite balcony still opened to the bright view toward the Hollywood sign. The infinity pool lay calm with water flat as a mirror catching spring sunlight. The rows of palms and lavender bushes continued to wrap the space, creating a dreamy feeling, separate from the outside world. The scenery was the same, but the man standing in it was different. He no longer buried himself in the studio for 18 to 20 hours a day like before. Life slowed down, lighter, with room to breathe. In the mornings, he meditated with Gigi. The two of them sat quietly together, saying nothing, only the wind gently touching the leaves. Yet they felt their love deeper than ever. In the evenings, he sat at the Steinway Grand, letting the keys echo in the warmly lit room, then told Jessica stories about his childhood in Chicago, stories he had never opened up about before. Some things you only find the courage to say after going through so many storms. Many times, he looked at his daughter and felt overwhelming regret. He admitted he had been wrong to put music above everything, letting her grow up in the empty space of a frequently absent father. Jessica didn't blame him. She listened quietly, then hugged him, her arms gentle but strong enough for him to feel forgiveness every single time. She said she understood his passion, and now she was proud of him, not because of the awards, but because he had dared to face his own problems. And Gigi, after years of quietly carrying everything, could finally breathe easy. She no longer had to play the role of caretaker. She could return to being an equal life partner, standing beside him as an equal. 2 years later, Jessica got married and still came home often, bringing her own children. The sound of children's laughter filled the once quiet house. Herbie spent a lot of time playing with his grandchildren, telling them stories about the first days he touched the piano keys, then patiently teaching them simple notes. He no longer missed important moments in the children's lives. Every birthday, every family gathering, he cherished and treasured. In a special corner of the house where the Nichiren altar stood, every day he spent time standing there, praying for his mother, for his sister, and for himself. He had walked through the darkest periods, survived, and was living better. Even though the pain of the past would never completely disappear, at least it had become part of the drive that helped him move forward. It made him realize that the things once considered most important, fame, money, or even this beautiful house, were really just the surface. What truly makes up the core of life is family, the ability to face your own mistakes, and the strength to stand up after every fall. And the house on the Hollywood Hills slope had walked with him through his brightest years, witnessed his darkest times, and continued to welcome the peaceful mornings when he found himself again. It wasn't an impenetrable fortress, but more like a living witness, recording every milestone of a life full of ups and downs. Within those walls there was both pain and resilience, loss and rebirth.